Folks, we are back with a little bit of a market update, a housing update on what's going on here in North Idaho. One thing that we continue to hear is something that pops up, every 3-4 months in the housing market this year, maybe even a little bit last year. But are we headed for a market crash? Has the bubble popped? Are we going to see 2008 again? And we are here to tell you, no, we are not in a housing crash. We are not in a housing bubble. We have not seen the bubble burst. We are not going to see the Great Recession again.
No.
And we're going to break it down and tell you why. But before we get there,
as always, subscribe, comment, turn on your notifications so that you guys don't miss any of the information that we bring to you every week. We kind of always break down different real estate topics as well as just North Idaho living in general. So every week, kind of something different. You'll be the first to know. So make sure you subscribe, interact with us in the comments. If you have topic ideas that you want to see, maybe there was something that really resonated with you from that video, let us know. We would love to know how it's being received. So
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And in terms of this particular video, definitely one of our kind of market updates. We like to get a market update in every 3 or 4 videos because we feel like it's important. People are seeking out this information.
Yeah.
These market updates are typically our most viewed videos as well.
Yeah.
So,
and with the market just kind of changing as quickly as it has been this year, we really just want to make sure that the information that you're watching and receiving is as accurate as it can be for that time, right? Because the last market update that we did might not be applicable at this point because everything's just like a roller coaster.
Yeah, exactly.
And
there are periods in real estate, obviously, where things are kind of the same message over and over and over again. I would say from the middle of 2020 all the way up through February of this year, it was like, well, there's bidding wars and price escalations and very little inventory. And that was the same message over and over again. But right now, things are changing so rapidly. So like Sammy said, this is your source for the most accurate information on the North Idaho housing market. So let's kind of dig into that.
Let's dive in.
Are we in 2008 again? No. We are not.
No, and I think it's also important to kind of remember that, markets and big events happen, and if we don't adapt and if we don't adjust from them, then obviously, yes, you're going to repeat history, right? But I think that with the housing crash in 2008, we learned a lot about, lending to unqualified buyers just left and right, and, over leveraging, and Lindsay will kind of speak a little bit more in depth with this because you were in the industry in 2008. I was not, so you have a little bit more firsthand experience about what that looked like and how it changed ongoing. But I think as humans, we naturally pivot and adapt, right? So when something happens, if we don't adjust from that point and make changes and drastic changes in this instance, then obviously history is going to repeat itself. But I think that we've taken the necessary steps to make sure that housing crash never happens again.
Yes. And to expand on that, the reason it's not 2008 again, and you have probably seen or read this information, but I'm repeating it because this is something that, I see not just in the comments, but in, interactions with friends, on social media, commentary all the time. Oh, we're headed for a crash again. The market's going to crash again. And even the news and the media, to a certain extent, likes to kind of fearmonger and fan the flames because it's clickbait. So we're here to clear up the fact that, it's not 2008. So again, some of the biggest things that led to the crash in 2008 were, like Sammy said, completely unqualified people getting into mortgages and loans that were not fit for them. They were fit for someone else who made more money. They had, stated income loans where it was hey, I swear I'm making 250 grand a year, wink, wink.
Yeah.
And then the lender would be like, great, here's your $1 million mortgage. And they were really making 125, which is a big difference. It's less than half. And then all of a sudden, the recession hits and there's unemployment issues and that loan comes due. And all of a sudden you're in a short sale position because you can't sell because you have a loan that's worth more than the house. There was a lot of over leveraging, like we stated, so people taking out home equity lines of credit and refinancing their home and pulling out cash from when equity was escalating. And then when things went downhill, they owed significantly more than what the house was worth. So that's called a short sale. And so distressed properties in general just kind of aren't really in existence this time. And foreclosures, obviously, that was a huge issue. Foreclosures during that down market. And what happened too was the banks put the foreclosures out as they came, and so they flooded the market with inventory, very cheaply priced, very affordably priced, so that they could move the inventory and get it off their books. But what that did was it pulled comparable sales down. It also, again, flooded the market with inventory. So when you talk about supply and demand, when the supply goes up significantly and demand is really not there because we're in a massive global recession, that was not the thing to do. And it just crashed the housing market. And that was really the root of all of that was the terrible, terrible lending standards that existed at that point in time.
It was like a free-for-all.
It was a free-for-all.
Just like you get a house, you get a house.
Yep. Everyone gets a house.
Yeah, and in reality, most of those people could not afford that mortgage. And it was just, honestly, it's very irresponsible lending.
Incredibly irresponsible. The heyday of the mortgage industry, for sure.
Yeah.
So on the heels of that came some legislation called Dodd-Frank. And what that did was it put really, really strict parameters around lending. And now people actually had to jump through a lot of hoops to get a loan. And so the people that have been getting the loans for the last decade or more have been people who are very well qualified. Yeah. They've vetted the sources of income. They've made sure the debt to income ratios are reasonable and sustainable. They've made sure that interest rates are sustainable.
Right.
They've made sure that, you're not getting a loan amount for more than you can pay back. Appraisals were a big thing. Those have been coming in and really reinforcing the values really well over the last decade or so. And so people have not been being put into loan situations where they're underwater.
Right.
Or they can't afford in the long term those loans. So what's happened is we've put much better homeowners into loan programs over the last decade. And the other thing too is because we've seen because there's been so many people just sitting on the fence for such a long time. I mean, we're still talking about, 14 years later, the recession and people who put plans on hold and who were on the fence because they wanted to wait till the economy recovered. And then we recovered so quickly.
Right.
But the thing is that because people have now typically been living in their homes longer and they put those plans on hold to ride out the recession, they've either completely paid off their homes, they own them outright, or the principal on their mortgage is incredibly low, and they've built so much equity in the last 4 or 5 years that even if they wanted to sell right now, or they lost a job, or they found themselves in like some sort of distressed scenario, you could sell right now and not be in a short sale situation.
Right.
And because you've got so much equity in your home and you can walk away with it and pay the loan back if you get in that situation, we're not seeing the foreclosures that we saw, the flood of foreclosures that happened during the 7, 8, 9 years. And so right then and there, the principle of the distressed property right now is fairly non-existent, whereas it was the emphasis of everything that happened in the last recession. So we don't have that component either.
Yeah.
One other thing that's also different is back then, builders, as we've talked about before on this show, builders over-speculated. Land was less expensive, labor and materials were less expensive, and it was a lot easier process to just throw up, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 houses. And these builders were just buying up land because the demand was really strong. Right. And so then they got caught on their heels as well with this glut of inventory on their books, land, spec homes. They were just churning them out. And nowadays, what's happened because builders have been so burned is they're far less speculative. They're definitely not putting out the number of homes that should be put out to keep up with demand. And at this point in time, just here in our local community between Spokane and Coeur d'Alene, over the last decade, we've underbuilt by almost 30,000 homes.
Yeah.
And so clearly, if we're 30,000 units short of meeting demand perfectly, we're not catching up to that anytime soon. So we just don't see the lack of lending standards. We don't see the distressed property scenarios because people are over leveraged. Right. And we don't see the glut of inventory that have come from those foreclosures and short sales and the overzealousness of builders. They're far more speculative than they used to be, far more cautious. Right. So again, lessons learned.
Yeah.
We are those scenarios that contributed to the last housing crash are not at play at this point in time.
Right.
And they will not come into play ever, really. I mean, the lending, we could see foreclosures, with forbearance and stuff kind of tick up. But one thing I have read and talked to a lot of lenders, if banks do end up taking homes back, or people do have to kind of give up their home and unemployment kind of goes in a different direction than it already has, banks are smarter about it. They're not just going to release everything into the market. Mm-hmm. They will kind of put it out as needed, because they also screwed themselves over when they plunged property values, because instead of getting $250 for the house, they were getting $150.
Yeah.
So that's that much more money they had to write off their books. So very different scenario from 2008 that we find ourselves in today. So today, the contributors towards the slowdown are
the interest rates.
Yes.
Yeah. So again, I feel like everything's kind of like a learning experience, right?
Are we talking about interest rates again?
Interest rates. Here we are again.
Yes.
I'm like, if you've been following along like you should be, you're like, how many times are we going to talk about interest rates? But I mean, it does come into play.
Yes.
Pretty big. House prices go up because your interest rates are low. We gotta balance it out somehow.
Yes.
So it's like really one of the only ways we can regulate pricing and that shift in the market that was like that mass housing fire. You know what I mean? So rates are high. I mean, as of today in our world, we're at like about 7%, and they're predicted to do another 2 hikes.
So by the time this video comes out, we may have already seen one more hike. And then there's another one here on the heels in December coming up.
So, we'll kind of see what that does. But we locally have already seen a pretty drastic, I would say, price drop.
Yes.
Across the board.
Yeah.
Which is, again, all due to the interest rates. You can't have low prices and low rates. You can't have high prices and high rates. They have to be, on that relationship. The feds are doing what they can to like kind of level everything out.
Yep.
Not a free for all. I think it just kind of goes back to the fact that we have learned from our past mistakes, and hopefully we aren't going to put ourselves in a position again to where it just like completely crashes and burns.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And I would say this recession that we're experiencing right now is not driven by the housing industry or the mortgage industry or the real estate industry. This is being driven by the consequences of COVID, where we saw the entire global economy shut down and then spring back to life. Demand was higher than it had ever been. People were moving around. Here in Idaho, we saw an influx of people who were moving here because of the lack of restrictions here. And so that's what drove up our housing market. But it becomes unsustainable on the long run, especially for people people who live and work here, and so it has to come down. So it's tempering itself out.
Yeah.
It is not, I just want to reiterate for the 1000th time, it is not a crash.
Yeah.
It may feel reminiscent of 2008, 2009, when prices were kind of coming down and everything felt like it was happening so quickly. But we have different drivers this time. It's more of a global economy. It's supply chain shortages. It's, lack of inventory. It's increased demand after people were pent up. And, when people were pent up, they weren't spending money. And all of a sudden they've got this influx of, savings and or, funds from COVID, stimulus, government stimulus, and people are out spending money. And so that has driven these prices to go up across the board, whether it's housing, food, gas, transportation, all sorts of stuff. And now they're trying to use housing as kind of the interest rates on housing as kind of the brake or the litmus test. Can we slow this stuff down? Because housing is kind of has a huge ripple effect. It employs, for every house that gets sold, it employs, 50 people or pays wages for 50 people and puts so much money back into the local economy or the national economy. So if we can start here, even though we're not the cause of it, we probably will be on the leading edge of the recovery for it or the slowdown for it, so then we can recover. So,
well, and I think too, it's really easy to jump back into that perspective, like, oh my gosh, are we going into another crash? Because it was like traumatizing.
It was very
you know what I mean? And
for many people.
So I think that it's just, that's human nature to kind of go into almost that like fight or flight, like, oh my gosh, is this happening again?
PTSD.
Exactly. Because it's like, it was such a huge impact on everything, obviously, that it was like the worst thing that could happen is another crash like 08. So I think that that's a normal response, but it's important to know that that's not happening, and the X, Y, Z are the reasons why. And people who are like fear mongering essentially either don't have all of their facts or have another agenda almost at mind.
They're trying to get views
it's like,
and clicks. Yes.
It's not what's happening. And I think that research and other things can back it up.
Speaking with knowledgeable realtors,
talk
as
to a professional.
advisors. Yes.
And, people who are, professionals either in your area or out of your area, wherever you may be, that do have like your best interest at heart, right? It's not like, we can provide some sort of value just at all. It doesn't necessarily have to be like, let's do business together right away. But, our main MO is just like getting out the right information and leading people in the correct direction of where they are currently, right? Yeah. And if that's like 6 months from now, great. If you're ready to pull the trigger now, great. But, I like to pride myself and ourselves in the fact that we are like genuinely trying to help people.
Yes.
And it's not just like a, slimy.
Turn them and burn them.
Yeah, that used car salesman reputation that, real estate kind of gets.
Yeah. We take a very, a much more of like an advisory or consultation type of mentality to our relationships with our clients, because every situation is unique. Everyone's timeline and goals are different.
Right.
And so, there's not just a one hat for everyone, one size fits all, one box for everyone. It's a unique, like curated, crafted scenario or approach or solution for everyone that we work with. Yeah. And so, if you guys need any advice, whether it's, buying, selling, relocation, investment, we know this North Idaho market really, really well. Not just the housing market, but the broader lifestyle and experience of living in North Idaho. We're happy to guide you along the way and be resources. I think that's the big thing, is just be resources for people. Because, we get a lot of calls from people that aren't necessarily looking for to hire us. It's just like, well, what do you think of this? Yeah. Or this has been on my mind, and what's your thoughts and what's your perspective on this? So we're happy to just chit chat with everyone. And
and with resources and information so readily available at your fingertips, it's easy to kind of like get a lot of misinformation,
Yes.
right? So like speaking to Lindsay or I and, you know, people who live and are immersed in this area and have been for, you know, years, you know, you get more of an accurate picture painted, I guess you could say, of like what's actually going on here, because you can read trends or reports or whatever, but if you're not like in the thick of it and you're not like experienced and living this daily, it's, you know, how accurate can your information really be? So I think it's just important to like keep that in mind, that talk to your professionals, talk to, you know, trusted professionals to get the most accurate information that you can.
Yeah. And I think one thing I will say in closing is everything is temporary. A lot of times when we talk about housing, people's thoughts are, you know, this was my goal, I can't deviate from this goal, or here's what my plan was. Right now, we've got to be, you know, you can't put your life on hold necessarily.
A little bit.
Yes, but you've got to learn to pivot. And not only are lenders and realtors pivoting, but buyers and sellers are. And so it's really fascinating to see all the pieces of the puzzle kind of working together as a team, whereas sometimes, you know, it's kind of an adversarial role, you know, buyers and sellers and listing agents and buyers agents, but we're really working hard right now, probably more so than I've ever seen since I've been in the industry, where people are actually like, how can we make this work?
Yeah.
How can this be a win-win for everybody?
Yeah, and work together, because at the end of the day, like our goal is to like get people in their dream house or like relocate,
or a
you know
sustainable,
what I mean?
healthy situation, you know, and sometimes, like I said, that goal might have been, well, I plan to by this age and this date have X, Y, and Z, and now I've got to push that out 3 to 5 more years.
Yeah.
You know what? That's okay.
It's okay.
A lot of these situations are temporary. We don't anticipate that, you know, just like the surge was temporary, we're back down to buyers having their negotiation power back and their leverage back. Interest rates aren't going to stay high for forever. There's the ability to refinance, and or are you going to live in your house for as long as you think you will? Maybe you won't. So maybe 3 years is not that bad. So you get an adjustable rate mortgage with a lower rate, knowing you're going to get out of that house within 5 years. So everything is figure outable. I love that saying. Thank you, Marie Forleo, I think, is the author of that book and kind of the originator of that phrase. But it's temporary, it's figure outable. You've just got to align yourself with the right advisors and the right knowledge and someone who understands that your scenario is unique. We'll shut it down here. We appreciate you guys, as always, watching our videos, subscribing, turning on notifications, staying up to date with our content, and engaging with us in the comments. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We hope you found this information valuable. Let us know if you want to talk or chit chat, talk shop, stuff like that. We're here for you.
We're here.
Yes.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.